How do I define success? I think it's actually just being happy and content with who you are. Paraphrasing my dad yet again, he said the most successful people in the world are often the nicest. And I really have gone through life noticing that. You'll see that you meet some of the most incredibly successful people in the world, and they're actually, most of them, are actually nice, genuine people.
Today our guest is Brandon Gien. Brandon is a distinguished leader in global design strategy and advocacy. As chair of Good Design Australia and executive director of the Australian Design Council, he plays a pivotal role in promoting design excellence and its impact on innovation, sustainability, and economic growth. A former president and current senator of the World Design Organization, Brandon has been instrumental in shaping international design policy. With a PhD in environmental design and extensive expertise in mechanical engineering and industrial design, his leadership has driven key global initiatives, including the World Design Impact Prize and World Design Medal. We are very fortunate to have him here as our guest today to share his story and to enlighten us on the power of design and how it shapes our world. Brandon, welcome to Tales from the Top.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, guys.
So who was your biggest inspiration growing up on the family farm?
It's got to be my dad. He really shaped, I think, the way that I see the world from a very, very young age, and being fortunate enough to grow up on a farm, and sort of just experiencing what it's like to sort of get your hands dirty and fix things if they break, and that sort of curiosity of being able to pull things apart without any fear, and just having a crack at understanding how things work as well. He wasn't a farmer. He was actually a medical doctor. He was an orthopedic surgeon who gave up surgery and wanted to go live on a farm and work on a farm. So he had that incredible brain that, I guess, from a medical background, he was an orthopedic surgeon. So it's just a joke that he was a very detailed carpenter, and sort of ingrained in me that old message of measure twice, cut once. But also just I guess growing up around a dad like that, you sort of learn from him and also try and aspire to be like that as well. So yeah, absolutely my greatest influence in life.
Do you find that carries through your whole life now, that grounding in the farm? Did it influence your career?
Yeah. I mean, this is showing my age here, probably 40, 50 odd years ago, and I never in a million years that I even imagined there was a thing called industrial design. Even later on when I finished high school and went to university, I did mechanical engineering, and I just thought that was, the closest thing to design, and I didn't know there was an industrial design course until I met someone who studied industrial design. I went, oh my God, that's exactly what I want to do. This engineering stuff.
So talking about aging you, what years are we talking about? When were you at university?
I started university in 91, sorry. It was my first year, so early 90s. And the industrial design cohort that went through, this is at the University of Newcastle, it was really the first year that went through was the year above me. So it was a very new degree at the time. If I look back at what industrial design is now in terms of the definition to what it was back then, it's such a big gap between, that being all about product design and now I sort of see industrial design being much more about strategy and yes, product development and that sort of hardcore product design side of it. But it's a lot more about business strategy. It's a lot more about strategic thinking. And it's also a lot more about looking at an ecosystem of what a product is. So, there's a digital component, there's a service component, there's all these other things. So
has that changed that much since you graduated to today? Going from
absolutely.
From hands-on design, here's a product, now you go and market it, to today it's now you're being part of the entire process.
Absolutely. It's and the awards have changed as well during that time. And I know when I first started, being a part of the awards in the sort of late 1990s, it was all about product design. We just looked at product from a product design perspective. There was, the internet was just a thing that was starting to kind of show its face. So the idea of a digital component to a product and an app that accompanied how a product functions, that was miles away, and now it's a given. If you have a product, it's sort of there is always a digital side to it. There's an app that might operate and function a product. It's just and I think designers, particularly industrial designers, are not just designing a manufactured product anymore. They are designing the entire ecosystem of how that product operates within a digital sphere as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'd actually like to go back a step. Before what you said that industrial design was this thing that you didn't even know existed. But if we can come back to where we're living in the farm, whereabouts were you in Australia?
So actually, it wasn't in Australia. I was born in South Africa. Believe it or not, I've lost the terrible accent. A lot of people go, "Wow." As a farm in South Africa, we moved across to Australia when I was 11 years old. So, growing up on a farm in the middle of South Africa was very, very different. And then moving across to Australia, again, a completely different experience.
Yes. And that 80s, 90s was such a controversial time, a massive
100%.
change at time.
Yeah.
Time of change then. Yeah.
What was it like growing up in South Africa?
Oh, look, it's feels like a million miles away, but an incredible experience. And it's a part of my memory that's always going to be, ingrained in me. But I've lived in Australia for more than 40 odd years now, and this is my home, and I sound more like an Aussie. It's funny when people ask me, like, "Wow, you're born in South Africa. You really don't sound like a South African." But yeah, it was a fascinating time, and as you pointed out, in the sort of early 80s, it was a really, really challenging time for the country. And if I look at it through now, I sort of have that ability of looking at the country through that design lens, and we look at something like designing policy, right? What a terrible piece of policy design that the country had at the time. And you can't fathom that as a small kid, but you look back now and you go, wow, that's had they anticipated just how the negative impacts of a bad piece of policy like apartheid would have had on the country, and imagine if they actually had designers being part of that conversation, how different things would have been. But long time ago.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing that, like you said, people pigeonhole it to, they hear the word design and they think product, or maybe they think architectural, or maybe fashion.
Yeah.
One of the things that, you've been advocating for, since about 2011 really, is that policy design, and strategic design is just as important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love pulling up this quote. Sarah Weir, who used to be the Design Council in the UK, their CEO, she's sadly passed away now. I had a wonderful chat to her, and she said something that really stuck with me. And she said the problem with design is that it's everywhere. And because it's everywhere, it's nowhere. And I really love that. And I think it's sort of, when you talk to a government bureaucrat and you try and explain what design is, they automatically think it's fashion, or it's about making a product look beautiful. When you sort of then start to unpack that and say, actually, it's a strategic way of thinking. It's a way of actually understanding the problem at a very, very deep level, and then using a creative design process to kind of unpack that problem and make sure you're solving the right problem before you go ahead and solve the problem right. You've heard that terminology before. A big part of the work I think that we've all done over the many, many years is to try and change that perception of what design is, not only to government and business, but also to the person on the street, And I always use the example, people don't pay attention to good design. If it does its job, if it does what it's meant to do, it's almost invisible. It's only when it doesn't work, it's only when it doesn't function, that you then start to notice it. So it's a challenging little subject to promote if you look at it through that context.
Yeah, I mean, even manufacturers, they just see it as add-on aesthetics, as opposed to something that is embedded, in from the get-go.
And that translates all the way. If I talk about it from the point of view of building design, pardon me, designing a building for a client, and you get the drawings to the builder to go and build. Invariably, the builder knows much more about design than you do, and that building then changes because the client will listen to the builder during that construction phase, and it devalues the whole design process if everybody has an idea because it's either not right or it's not there's not right or wrong. It's simply an opinion. And the person either making for the sake of economy or laziness will change something, or just purely because they have a different opinion. And you end up with a transom in a window at head height, so you can't see, and no one really understands. So that the devaluing of design, of good design, and the input and the effort required is I think it's still a problem, certainly at that level. That would be different, of course, I presume, Lee, from what you're doing, because you design and manufacture and supply. Where does that sit? What are those frustrations you've had? Today's episode is sponsored by us, Chiron Audio and Devison Design.
At Chiron, we enrich people's lives with music systems that create lifelike three-dimensional images that evoke real emotional responses and allow true connection to recorded music. With our strategic partners, we can help you create the ultimate environment to enjoy your Chiron music system. From interior design guidance through to an entire bespoke listening room, we can assist you to bring your dream to life. Life is better with music, and music is better with Chiron.
Devison Design creates luxury garage environments for the discerning automotive collector, preserving your collection in surroundings that are more gallery than garage, and so enhancing the value of your enjoyment. With projects across Australia and Europe, Devison Design provides design services worldwide. Truly bespoke garages start with inspiring designs. Let Devison Design inspire you.
To get in touch with one of our principals directly, visit our website, chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au to book a consultation.
And now on with the show.
And I like the analogy of a builder, and we often use that as an example. Like, you're never going to get a builder to design a building. You get the architect to design the building, and you get the builder to build it, right? I think the challenge is a lot of businesses believe that they don't need design. Like, I'm designing it. I'm the owner. If it's a manufacturing company, they'll have engineers that are there, or looking at look at the business from a manufacturing point of view. So we actually don't need design because we've got these people who do it for us.
Yeah.
They don't actually understand that design is a very, very specialized skill set that doesn't just help them make something. It helps them make something that's competitive from the right materials, the right manufacturing process, turns it into a product that's desirable to consumers, that's aligned to your brand. All those things, again, if you look at it through that context of a builder, well, the architect makes it into a beautiful building.
And also makes it a machine for living that works. And that's really important. And so
coming back to your question, the biggest challenge I see is that if you look specifically at Australia, there are a lot of businesses, and Lee, your business is one of them, that understand the value of design. They've embedded it into their business. They see it as a strategic tool. It's not just about designing the product, it's about designing the entire experience. It's about the brand, it's about the communication, it's about the whole package, right? And those businesses are doing well. They're remaining ahead of their competitors, and developing and constantly innovating. The challenge is that a lot of businesses in Australia that just don't use design. They don't see a need for it. They see it as an expense rather than an investment. And the feedback we're getting all the time is like, why? I'm a coffee shop. I run a coffee shop. I do really well. Why would I need design? But then when you start to unpack it, you go, well, do you understand who your customer is? Do you really deeply empathetically understand who your customer is? Go through a design process, and you'll quickly find out that that coffee shop could triple its sales if they just paused for a minute and went through a design process of understanding who their customer is, looking at their supply chain as an example. Where do they get all their produce from? Could that be redesigned? Could their menu, something as simple as a menu, be redesigned? Because most of their customers, might be from an older age group, and their font size is too small, so they can't read it. They go to the coffee shop next door.
That's right.
The business could benefit from perhaps interior designers by looking at, you've got your cash register at the front door, whereas all your customers are lined up around the corner. There's so many aspects of any business that can benefit from design, and I think that's the message we've been trying to get across.
I wonder if the whole notion of Australians, and I'll pick on Australians, the whole notion of Australians not appreciating the input and value of designers is linked to the poor record we have of teaching students critical thinking. Critical assessment of a situation is essentially the basis of good design.
That's another whole kettle of fish. Design education. I've got two small kids who are at school, and I'm constantly amazed at what's being taught. And I think it's not only here in Australia; it's all over the world. We need to teach our kids creative problem solving, and call it design, call it creativity, but that element of actually going, how do I solve a problem using a design process? I think our next generation of innovators and designers and entrepreneurs can really benefit from that.
How do you actually define good design? I mean, it's in your brand. How would you articulate that?
I knew you were going to ask me this question at some point. I have probably been asked, how do you define good design as a question like a billion different times. It was the basis of my PhD thesis, looking at design evaluation systems and metrics, and how do you actually pick up a product and go, is this well designed or not, and from what context? I'll tell you a little side story. When I was tapped on the shoulder to be the president of the World Design Organization, it was such an amazing honor and an amazing roller coaster ride, and you get to meet all these incredible people from all over the world. And one of the things that's sort of quite traditional in the organization is before you kind of go ahead and nominate, I'm nominated to be the next president, and you have to get elected, of course, by the members at the General Assembly. You have to get the endorsement from the oldest living senator.
Okay.
And at the time, the senator who was in place during my term was the incredible Kenji Ekwan. Now, if you know Kenji, he's also sadly passed away now. Kenji Ekwan.
Is he the guy that designed the soy sauce bottle?
This little soy sauce bottle.
Man, that's elegant.
Red. That's just the most Kikkoman soy sauce. One of the most iconic little products, and stood the test of time. And so I had to fly to Tokyo. I had to go and have dinner with Kenji, and hopefully make a good impression and get his blessing to go ahead and then become the next president. And lo and behold, the question of good design came up, and he asked me, like, what do you think good design is? And I just automatically started to go through what I'd learned at university. Good design is about being functional, about being aesthetically beautiful. It's about being sustainable. It's about representing quality. And as I sort of got more and more into my explanation, I just saw him started to shake his head. And I thought, oh God, I failed dismally here. And he said, in his very Japanese way, he said, no, good design is not anything that you say. I thought, oh, great.
Wow.
And there was this uncomfortable pause, and he went on to explain from his point of view that good design is beautiful. Just the simple word, good design is beautiful.
Wow.
And in the back of my head, I was going, oh, mate, you're wrong, because I associated beauty with form, right? And then he went on to explain himself. He said, and you've got to keep in mind here that Kenji is a Buddhist. He's a Buddhist monk, so he's very, very spiritual. And he went on to explain that if you look at a flower, if you look at the design of a flower, it's beautiful to the naked eye, but it's beautiful because it has a purpose, and its purpose is to attract the bee. And the bee itself has been specifically designed so that it sits on that flower and performs a function. And he went on to explain this beautiful ecosystem of nature, and it all centered around this word beautiful. And I'll never forget it. It was just a moment in time where I'm like, wow, you know. So I love to describe good design as being beautiful, and then telling that story, because I think beauty has so much more to it. It's got to be beautiful to look at. It's got to be functional. It's got to be appealing. It's got to work. It's got to say what it does, what it says on the box. It's a whole bunch of things, but I just love the simplicity of that word, that it's actually, at the end of the day, it's beautiful. And that relates to walking into a building and you go, wow, isn't this beautiful? Or it relates to picking up a product and using it, and you just, there's the sense of joy that you get out of using a product that's been well designed. You go, wow, that's beautiful. You know, someone's actually cared so deeply about designing this little aspect of the product. And not by accident. There's a bunch of people that have spent, you know, days and days and days of hard work to design that one little element that has resulted in me saying it's beautiful. So,
and then the bricklayer comes along and works out that if we turn the bricks this way instead, we can make it more.
I had that experience just the other day, like a relatively cheap set of earpods. You know, it was $100, whatever. But the case, you know, and the work that went into it, and the perfect way that the seam, when it closed, you know, there was no seam that your fingernail could catch on. You know, because it's designed to go in your pocket. You don't want it to, dig into your leg when you sit down, and all those types of things. I mean, I must admit though, like in the middle of the night when you're trying to open it up, it's almost near impossible to find where it is. But it's just, you're so right. It's just not noticed unless it's typically broken, you know, that beautiful weighted feel, the right amount of spring tension, everything to, you know, it's almost like a show when you get it right. It's like delighting someone with, I
love, you know, there's another little saying from one of our judges, and we were going through, and obviously we're looking at, you know, hundreds of different products and projects that come through the awards, and we asked her, she's from the US, and what, you know, how do you describe when something's been beautifully designed? And she had this little saying that joy is not accidental, and I love that as well. You know, when you pick up a product as a user and you interact with it and you kind of smile, you go, wow, that's clever. Like that little interaction is not an accident; it's deliberate. Someone's thought really hard about designing it in there, and it to me that this idea of design that shows that that the user actually matters. We care about the way that this product is going to be used. We care about the user who's using it. That's really, really great design. And it varies because it depends what context you're also looking at it. If you're looking at a building, you can describe good design in a completely different way. If you're looking at an app, if you're looking at a website, if you're looking at a piece of infrastructure as well, I think it all comes back to, have they actually considered the user? Have they deeply understood who the user is and designed everything they possibly can around that user? Unfortunately, there's not a lot of really, really great design out there. There's some terrible examples of design and some really, really bad design. And it comes back to what we said. You know, it's only when you see bad design that you actually then notice it. So,
do you find that this is, you know, something that people get better at with age, the more considered they get? Like, I think back on my own personal career, and you're always drawn to the aesthetic first, you know, and the older I've got, the more it's about trying to put yourself in the position of the user and, you know, thinking past the visual. I just imagine it's like, you know, I guess I liken it to a musician. They're like, it takes a long time, you know, for you to become a very accomplished musician.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're also going to have to get as we get older, we get a little bit frustrated because we know there's a commercial reality, and the commercial reality is really indifferent to our sensibilities. It's indifferent to where the commercial reality is we need 15 of these. The brief is that near enough is good enough, and the budget means that our version of near enough is much lower than your estimation of near enough. And so I think commercial realities just transition us from the world of design with art with a purpose, i.e. design, to just simply getting a product out the door because they want us ship 15 widgets. And that's a great frustration, I think. And I think that's the thing that the lack of funds in and the lack of appreciation of good design in Australia is driving people to simply get a thing out the door to meet this criteria. I know I get frustrated with it.
But is that just an Australian thing? I mean, I know that
it has to be global.
You look at you look at the Europeans. It always looks like the European design is quite often a cut above what we do here. But at the same time, we've achieved incredible things here as well. Yeah. What do you think, Brandon?
It's I see it in the projects coming through the awards, particularly in product design, where there was the designer's intent. And we get a lot of content that gets submitted with every project that comes through the awards. So you'll see schematics, you'll see CAD renderings, you'll see a lot of what the designer actually proposed, and then you pick the product up and you go, ugh. And I think that is an incredibly frustrating thing because, as you were saying, it comes down to that commercial reality that there's this is what the designer actually had in mind, but then the manufacturing process let it down, or there's a wrong choice of materials, and there's the finishes and all the fits, and everything was just like, wow, okay, it looked really good on paper, and those CAD renderings looked amazing, but when you pick the product up, it's just like, oh, they've really bummed it, and I think that's where that, unfortunately, that commercial reality comes into it, and they've got to make some hard decisions, and I think one of the big challenges is that the designer takes it so far and then hands it over and says, it's up to you now to go and manufacture the thing. Yeah. Whereas the designer should actually go all the way through and provide that oversight, and provide that governance, and get the product all the way through to the end and go, yeah, that's exactly how I imagined it.
100%. I've had to fight people on that in the past. It's like, no, we've got it from here. It's like, no, you don't.
Well, you're going through that at the moment with one of your manufacturers. Potential.
Yeah, 100%. It's you've got to be there. Even way, one of my mentors, we have on here soon, Andrew Rogers. Andrew, well, obviously Brandon, but that's one of the things that he's drummed into me over the years is you design the entire process.
Well, you have to be a holistic designer if you're going to do that. You've got to be the person who uses this thing, the pencil, all the way through to the person who is standing and tapping the guy on the shoulder who's making the mold, or who's machining
or bagging it.
Time. Putting it in a bag to make sure it's turned around the right way.
Absolutely.
And then doing the labeling so that the packaging actually suits the intention as well and shows it off to its best.
Yeah.
So
we had that experience during COVID when we made, the face shields.
Yeah.
That was challenging because you only had a limited amount of, things around materials, time, contact hours, all of those types of things. But, we, through, what we did with Andrew, he designed the entire process. So we were packaging, 2,000 units a day with 2 people. And we know that other competitors were using 30 people to do that same process just because of design.
Just because it had been designed. Yeah.
That's correct. So just strategic design, and I think this is the lost opportunity here, particularly in Australia, where we're so about digging holes and exporting raw materials before value adding.
Yeah,
that's
the lucky country.
That is the biggest. Well, we're running out of time with that. We're right on the end of it, and it's time that we have to. This is why I think it's so important what Brandon is doing, like holding this torch for, and we're all responsible for it. Designers, yourself in your field, it's we have to educate people. Yeah. We can make a lot more money as a country, by value adding our raw materials into beautiful, well designed, well considered product.
Lee, don't get me started on that.
No, go.
Please,
That's why we're here.
this
yeah,
is all about
no,
starting.
no,
Speak your
I
mind.
completely agree with everything you said, and this Future Made in Australia um, campaign that the government, is spruiking is great, and it's fantastic that there's a government there that is promoting um, an Australian-made future.
Mm.
What we're trying to say is, well, it's not just about a future made in Australia; it's a future designed and made in
Yeah.
Australia, because really anything can be made and anyone can make anything. It's just about how well you make it and how competitive you make it. And I'm sure you'd speak to any business saying, do you just want to produce another Me Too product? Or do you want to produce a world-class product that's going to be a game changer, that's going to have consumers, falling over themselves to get one? That's where design comes in.
And that's, I think, isn't that the only place where we're really going to, that's the front line, I think, of how we're going to change that whole process in Australia, is being the best, not being in a price war, but being in a niche where this is the best version of that. You can't get this anywhere else. Yes, it's more expensive, but look how beautiful it is.
100%. And if you hold two identical products up, two competitive products up, the one that's been designed, the one that's actually gone through a professional design process, that's the one that's going to win in the long run. So from a commercial point of view, from an environmental point of view, you've got a badly designed product that a consumer will go out and buy. They might use it for a few months. It breaks because it's been poorly made. It's been made from the wrong materials. What do? Well, sometimes they'll take it back and get a refund, or they'll just throw it in the bin.
Yeah,
it's cheap, it's nasty. So there's that cultural, environmental aspect to, like, if you are not producing a well-designed product, you're actually producing junk. And Lee, maybe you've heard me sort of use this term before, that I think I've heard so many times, industrial designers, you guys are landfill designers. The bad industrial designers are essentially just designing landfill. And there's companies out there that are just producing, excuse the French, crap. It's bad quality product, hasn't gone through a proper professional design process, ends up being bought and ends up in landfill. We need less of that. And we need to get to a point where products do last a lot longer, and design is a way of helping to achieve that.
I've always loved is it William Deneau, or correct me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but the circle, cradle to cradle approach, that had a real flow on in, I don't know, what I'd say the early 2000s, maybe 2010-ish. I suppose we heard a lot about that. Are you still seeing that coming through, or do you think that's a bit of it's been a fad and gone out the other side?
Yeah, when I studied industrial design, I'll never forget this, because we were obviously taught that you start with a design brief and you write all your parameters around what the project is, and sustainability was sort of I remember my lecturer saying, that's a fad, it'll pass, don't worry about putting that in, just make sure it's functional and it's commercially available, all those sorts of things that we were taught. And if you fast forward to 2025, literally every single project that comes through the awards has a sustainability statement that is attached to it. If you can't actually articulate that you've at least made an attempt to reduce your environmental impact on the way that project has been brought to market, we don't even look at it, we just chuck it out. So I think there's an absolute necessity for designers to put much more focus on sustainability, on circular design practices as well. How do you design your product to be more circular? And then the step above that,
right to repair.
I'm sort of seeing right to repair falls into that, product stewardship falls into that, but also regenerative design. That's a thing, and I think is sort of like the next big step that we need to take. So you're not just designing something to stay in the system for as long as possible. How do you actually use regenerative design processes You're seeing that in the agricultural space, that farmers using regenerative design. We ran a project with Bega Valley, and it was just incredible to see that that's a thing now.
Tell us about that
architects.
project. Yeah, tell us
All
about
right.
that.
Yeah.
So
You've stolen my thunder.
Bega Valley, as you know, it was a beautiful, pristine farming area, New South Wales, and a lot of that area got wiped out during the bushfires that we had. So the farmers, producers, sort of got together and said, how do we make sure this sort of never happens again, and how do we work collectively and collaboratively? And they formed a consortium which is known as the Bega Circular Valley. And led by Bega Cheese, the chairman there, Barry Irwin, and really looking at how do they actually get all the different farmers and producers to work together and create Australia's first circular economy. That's the image there, and just a fascinating way of looking at how design can actually be used in every single part of those little transactions and those little interactions, and regenerative farming practices as well. How do you share your farmland with someone who might be farming cows, rather than get their cows to go over and eat all the grass rather than having to mow it? That's probably the simplest way of explaining that. But a wonderful example of the sort of design that we've been talking about, that it's not just about a product, it's about a whole ecosystem.
And they're going to be saving a lot of money through that entire process, right? I mean, they're not spending money on chemicals. They've got free fertilizer.
Reusing a lot of the stuff that would otherwise end up in landfill, being really, really, looking at, as I said, every single interaction, every single thing that happens in that region. How do they make sure that it stays as circular as possible?
Well, this is the whole transition we're coming full circle. I mean, if you look at farming practices up to the 16th century, it was exhaustive. So it's crop rotation that came to the fore in the agricultural minds of the 17th century in Europe, particularly in England, that realized that we plant certain crops that take the nitrogen, then we plant another crop that puts the nitrogen back, typically with legumes, and then we have a year where we're running livestock on it to put even more nitrogen. So that process started in the 17th century, and here we are now reassessing that whole critical farming practice and putting it and taking it even further. So it's not necessarily a new thing; it's just a clever evolution of smart.
They'd have to have redesigned that, though. I mean, like we'd all go hungry if it wasn't for fertilizer right now.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
That's the reality of it. But these processes, like I guess
it reduces the
beautiful
requirements.
Example, the Bega Valley one. It's if we can increase the yield,
which is great.
And the beautiful thing is, never in a million years did I think that I'd be talking to farmers about design and how farmers use design, and it's such a funny little journey, because I always think to myself, wow, I grew up on a farm, and here I am talking to design to farmers.
So how were you received by them? How were you received by the general farming community when these conversations were happening?
I think initially kind of like scratching their head, but Bega, Barry Irwin is such a champion for design. He gets it, he understands it, he sees it as a systems design challenge, and so having someone like him champion the cause, I think, helped a great deal. But I just want to stand back to something else you said. It was another project that came through the awards last year, a company called Sea Forest. I don't know if you've heard of these guys. It's a Tasmanian company where they farm. It's a special kind of seaweed called Asparagopsis that extracts a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. So it's doing good on that side. But actually, they harvest this Asparagopsis. They put it through many processes, and then end up feeding it to livestock. And it's meant to reduce the methane output of cows by something like 70%.
70%. That's astronomical.
I've got a couple of teenage sons who could probably do some of that.
Don't quote me on the exact number, but yeah, it's some amazing amount of methane, and methane is one of the biggest contributors to carbon emissions. So,
Yep.
what an amazing project. And again, is it a product? Is it a process? Is it a system?
It's design.
It's design, right? So they also need to make sure that they invest in design in their supply chain, in the way that they farm this stuff and the way that they extract it out of the oceans and turn it into a product. The product that was actually entered was a thing called a lick brick. So it's essentially a big square brick that they actually drop onto into the farmland, and the cows go and lick this thing, and it's meant to reduce their methane output. It's those sorts of projects that when you start to talk to people in government, they go, oh, I didn't know that was design. Well, of course it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. You really need to get those stories across. I mean, I'm glad you're doing that because, like I said, we need more people holding the torch.
and I think that had we put the same amount of effort into the process of design and designers and what they can achieve as we did into the sports in Australia, just 10%.
Yep. Yes.
Our what would be the value of the gross domestic product of measuring design? I think in New Zealand it's 10 billion annually. What is it in Australia? Is that by a factor of 10? Are we going to be doing that?
And I love the sport analogy. I think we're fantastic at celebrating our sporting heroes in this country, and so we should. But equally, we should be celebrating our entrepreneurs, celebrating our designers, our inventors, our scientists,
our musicians.
There was a study. Just to answer your question around design's contribution to Australia's economy, so the closest thing we got to the New Zealand report was IP Australia conducted a report, I think in 2018, and they estimated that design's contribution to Australia's GDP was valued at $67.5 billion. That's
wow.
greater than the construction sector, right?
Wow.
So for us, it was gold. We finally had a number that we can point to.
And was that 200 front page of all the national newspapers?
No.
Yeah, right below the grand final.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Barry kicks another goal home.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that phenomenal, right?
Yeah,
yes.
$67 billion. That's the contribution that design is estimated to make to our economy, with dare I say, very little help from the government. And I always imagine if we actually had a government that was design led, that understood the value of design, we could double that number, we could triple that number. And coming back to your comment around, got to get away from this idea of just digging stuff up, shipping it out, and then buying it back at 10 times the price.
Yes. I think we need to actually have the Australian National Day of the Designer.
Okay.
Where designers are celebrated. It's not a public holiday yet.
Oh, that's a shame.
But we can have parades. We can have design exhibitions.
I love the way you think.
and just start the process at a cultural level, which doesn't need a politician to say, "Bless you, you can do that," or anyone to put any money into it. Let's just have a day where we get industry, everyone to recognise today's the International Day of Design, Australia's National Day of the Designer, and we're going to celebrate these heroes and try and get as many government and non-government organisations involved as possible. And maybe that's led by, by Brandon, by you.
He's already doing
it. There. Let's do the day.
That's his job.
Yeah. Oh, I mean the actual day. Have the festival day. Yeah. Do the festival.
Brandon Gien Day.
Yeah.
There is the World Design Organization actually does celebrate World Industrial Design Day. I think it's the 29th of June each year, and they encourage countries from all over the world to really pause and just celebrate that day. So maybe we've never really done anything that big in Australia. It might be an opportunity to take your idea and turn it into something. Where
I think there's festivals across the nation.
Thanks. Well, look, we've jumped around a bit. I did want to get back to you. I'm going to get back to your career, but just because we're on this flow and we're talking about value adding, and this was actually going to be my last question, but I want to talk about the Australian Design Council and your work there. And I know that you and I have had previous conversations with some of our peers about this, and I think what Brandon's and this organisation is doing is quite incredible, because they're changing it at a grassroots level. So maybe you could talk a bit more about what the Australian Design Council is and what they're doing and how they're showing, to your average SME that you can create more wealth, through your company, through
and a festival day.
And a festival day, sure. So we during COVID, a few colleagues of mine got a hold of me and said, there's all these conversations happening at government about sovereign capability and our ability to manufacture, all this particular PPE gear and all this stuff, and design is not being a part of that conversation at all. And we thought it would be a great idea to resurrect, for want of a better word, the Australian Design Council. It's sort of been sitting there on a shelf so many years and had this incredible history that we share with Good Design Australia going all the way back to 1958. My colleague and I, Sam Bucklow, went about having, conversations. It was all through Zoom because we're all during lockdown. And I guess just try to sound out a few people and say, would an initiative such as an Australian Design Council have any value? What would it look like? What would we actually do? And slowly but surely, we open up this conversation to some very respected business and industry leaders. Catherine Livingstone, for example, who was the former chairman of Commonwealth Bank. She was actually the former CEO of Cochlear as well. David Thodey, who was the former CEO of Telstra, chair of CSIRO. Andrew Liveris, the former CEO of Dow Chemical. Really impressive people, real business industry leaders. And I guess just started to open up the conversation around what would a council look like? What would its function be? How do we make sure we're not replicating what already exists? And this whole idea of really trying to embed design capability into Australian business. How do you do that? We've tried to do it through the awards program, but at the end of the day, it's a design promotion activity. We have these incredible projects and we throw them up on a pedestal and we try and generate as much media as possible. And that has its place. But it wasn't enough. We weren't getting through to government. We weren't actually getting through to business. We weren't actually able to amplify that message as much as what we'd like to. So that led to the re-establishment of the Design Council. And where we are today, we're very fortunate. We got some funding to set the operations up properly. It's now set up as a not-for-profit charity that's got charitable status. And the main function that the Design Council will carry out is to actually go into Australian businesses and run what we've called design reviews. So I use the coffee shop again as an example of a business that would never use design. Could be a family-run business, like I don't really need design. We would go in and run almost a design audit over that business to understand, are they using design? If they are, what is their design maturity? Is it really up here? Are they a design-led business, or are they just absolutely, completely design blind and not using it at all, or are they sort of somewhere in the middle? So we've built a self-assessment tool, which we're very excited to be launching in the next couple of weeks, which will be a free online tool that any business in Australia can essentially log on, answer a whole bunch of questions with regards to how they use design in a product development sense, or if they're designing a service or an app or anything, to try and extract from them, where does design sit within that process? So it will essentially give them a design maturity score at the end, and then also try and understand how they're using design to deliver greater impact from an environmental point of view, from a commercial point of view, from a societal point of view, and from a cultural point of view. So that's, sorry, my little earbuds just fell out.
That's all right.
That's basically it. It's a very aspirational set of objectives that we have for the Design Council. It's, at the end of the day, our overarching objective is to really see if Australia can be a design-led culture. How do we actually embed design into Australia's culture? So it's something that's going to take a long time. We've all acknowledged this is not going to happen overnight. And I think working alongside the role that Good Design Australia plays in promoting design, and the Design Council being out there advocating for this design culture and embedding design capability into Australian business, I think is a really exciting thing. So that's sort of consumed me for the last 12 months. It's probably going to consume me for the rest of my life now. But really, really exciting, and we're very fortunate to be guided by an incredible group of mentors and industry champions who sit on the board and who are really passionate about this. And so as I said, the end objective is that we've got 10, 20, 30, 100, 1,000 businesses that go through this. And essentially, at the end of the day, it's also about building the demand for design. So if we've got 1,000 businesses that would never have used design, and they can all kind of go, I see the light. I'm now going to employ an industrial designer or a graphic designer or a systems designer or a web designer. That's really good for the industry as well.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. Yeah. I mean, everyone wins from this situation.
Yeah,
the customer ends up with a better experience. The fish and chip shop is selling more fish and chips, probably better, probably faster, cleaner. It's just
quality.
That's it. I mean, there's obviously the fish and chip shops are, an average example, but you start putting that onto high design or high value items.
Yeah. And to Brandon's point before about the process of the coffee shop, if employing an interior designer, if you the point you made, if you put the cashier, the till by at the door, and then you've got 40 people queued down the street because they're waiting to place an order, and then there's no one waiting for their coffee. That's all about interior design. The fish and chip shop is a great one point because you have that price point of order, wait for 15 minutes, go and stand over there. And the whole process of interior design and the way that the humans flow and interact with each other. It's not just a matter of place order here, sit there, wait, come up. It's the interaction of the human and how they actually want to and feeling comfortable whilst they're in that environment, being either made to wait, overcoming the anxiety that their position of the queue is going to be lost and their order's lost and they're missing out, and giving them confidence and comfort. So the whole notion of design not being important in something as so fundamental is a serious problem.
Well, McDonald's is the perfect example of high design. Isn't it really? That's why they won, is because they had incredible design processes down to, how many steps is it from the fryer to the, to serving the chips, to
time and motion.
Everything.
Look, it's for us, it's, every single piece of research, every single piece of data points to the fact that if a business uses design as a strategic tool, it grows, it employs more people, it's more prosperous, it's designing and developing better products, better services. So it's not us making this stuff up. You can look at any piece of research coming out of the UK, the US. There's some fantastic stuff from the UK Design Council that sort of shows that £1 invested in design returns a £6.7 return. So all we're trying to do is to say, right, if all the evidence that exists points to the fact that design creates a more flourishing business, that's all we're trying to do is to connect that design narrative to a business and say you should go away and actually think about how you can embed design capability into your business. And as you said, it's good for the business. The business is generating more profit. It's good for the economy if all these businesses are doing that. They're employing more people, so it's good for employment. But it's also really good for the design sector here in Australia because we want to create demand for designers. We want designers to be as popular as our sporting heroes. And businesses queuing up to pay for the design services. So that's really the intent of the whole thing.
So how do you get the word out? Are you going to do some kind of case studies and show this is a business prior? This is, because most people, I would imagine a fish and chip shop is most interested in about how much more money am I going to make? If I'm going to make an investment, is that the draw card? How do you show that?
Yeah, so we've actually we'll have a number of video case studies that we've produced. We've been working away in the background, which we'll be announcing and launching as well to really just get people to sit down and watch and go, what does excellence, what does good look like when
Yeah.
design is being used in a business in the mining sector? What does
Mm.
good look like if if design is being used in a company that focuses in medical technology or consumer goods, for example? So I think that narrative that actually we want a business owner to kind of go through the process and
Mm.
go for the light bulb to actually physically go off and go, wow, I never thought I needed this thing called design, and now I
Will you
do.
incorporate? Would you seek to incorporate this notion as part of the standard as a core subject in business management in business schools? Just not just from a 2-year diploma or a 3-year degree in business management or a part of a master's program, but for the guy who's doing and girl who's going to be doing a
MBA.
12-week, even just a 12-week certificate course in how do I run up and set a successful business. I think it has to become a foundational aspect of business training for the guy who's got the carpentry business, the couple who have the chicken shop, the lady who has a hairdressing salon, all the way up to an MBA.
Yeah.
So if you do that, it then becomes inherent.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be wonderful, to have that. I know there's a few universities that incorporate design thinking modules and but not enough. I'll come back to my dad because I know, one of the things that used to fascinate me about talking with him is I wish I knew about design when I was studying medicine, because I could be in an operating theatre and I would consider, the surgical equipment that I'm working with could be better designed.
Yeah.
I would then zoom out and go, well, actually, the entire operating theatre could be redesigned if I had that in the back of my mind, rather than looking at it as a surgeon.
Yes.
I'm now looking at it as a design informed surgeon.
Yes.
And then we would have these wild conversations about, well, it's not only just the surgical room, it's the actual entire hospital could be redesigned. And then you zoom out a bit further and go, wow, you could actually apply design to our whole health system,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
In the way that patients interact with the service, and it's such a wonderful way of sort of looking at how design actually cuts through in all these different layers, from a product level through a service level to a business level, all the way through to a sector. I think that's kind of, again, we're trying to open up this conversation through the Design Council, that design impacts, right through to the product, all the way through to a business, and all the way through to how do you actually embed design capability into a sector. Like, how does our mining sector become more competitive if they work together as a sector, and look at design in that context? So yeah, really interesting stuff.
The health one in particular. I mean, I know my anaesthetist and one of Jade's clients, I've had that conversation with him, talking about, how do they design that space better? And, for healing in mind, you go to, if anyone been unfortunate enough to spend time in hospital, it's, it's not a place of healing. It's highly stressful and highly fatiguing. Most of the time you've got machines that go bing and
having matching curtains and sheet sets is not where it all is.
No.
But even that little basic fundamental thing, if that wasn't important, private hospitals wouldn't manage that, and you wouldn't feel a different sense of peace and calm.
Yeah, why does it have to feel like a hospital? Why can't it feel like a hotel? Why? Why do we make these environments so
sterile?
Yeah.
It has to be sterile, but it doesn't have to look or feel sterile.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you want to get them out as quickly as possible too. I don't want to check out yet because I'm having such a lovely time. Nurse, another quart of blood, please. Not quite good.
Brandon, I know we're coming close to the end of our time, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the actual design awards. We haven't even discussed that, and that's your primary role. I mean, how did that start? I mean, was that back in college? I believe you did a cadetship or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I graduated from Newcastle University with my industrial design degree tucked under my arm, and I was going to go find a job, and a last minute phone call from my lecturer and said that Standards Australia, who the body who were running the awards at the time, they actually inherited the Australian Design Awards from the federal government. They were running the awards. They were looking for a sort of a cadet ship, almost a work experience person to come and join the team, and he recommended my name, and so I went to Sydney, and
Wow.
I got this job with Standards Australia in their Design Awards department, and I thought, I'll just give it a crack, see where it goes. I might make a few contacts, and the thing that really struck me was just how much history was behind this beautiful thing. We had a room at Standards where they had all the archive material, and I'd find myself going through there and picking up black and white photos of, what were they called at the time? The Prince Philip gave out this thing called the Prince Philip Prize for Australian Design each year. They'd close off George Street in Sydney. They'd give him a ticker tape parade.
Wow. There you go. There's your design day.
And that's, coming
the foundation for the Design Celebration Day.
Sorry, Brandon. Sorry.
Coming back to this idea of how we used to, how we celebrate our sporting heroes. We used to do it back then.
Yeah.
We used to do it. And it was televised on ABC television. We've got all this beautiful footage of Ida Buttrose was the host, and she would host the awards ceremony, and it used to be televised to Australians. And that just, I was just drawn to that, going, wow, this thing has got so much potential.
How wonderful it would be to get that old footage, just start the process of seeping out that old footage every now and then.
Yeah, we've got a lot of it. And we had our 60th anniversary in 2018 at the Sydney Opera House, which was beautiful. But so I found myself going from, I guess, a work experience student to just hanging around and just saying, right, I feel there's like a different journey that my career is actually going to take. I may not be a hands-on industrial designer, but how do I actually apply that design process that I was taught to the design awards? And so when I joined Standards, it didn't have the prestige that it once had back in its heyday, I think it's fair to say. And a big part of my job was to go and talk to the designers. I spent 12 months traveling around Australia and talking to as many of the industrial design consultancies as possible, and getting all their feedback and saying, this is, at the end of the day, it's your award program. You tell us what we can do to improve it. And went about redesigning the entire thing. So that was almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
And just fell in love with it, fell in love with the industry, fell in love with the people, and just became, ever so passionate about what it is that we're doing. I think there's something bigger than the awards here, filters into the conversation around celebrating design and really, embracing that culture of design.
Do you think we could bring back, like I remember watching all that stuff on TV, like Beyond 2000, and that was the kind of thing.
They would think it was toward 2000 to start with.
Okay, I'm not that old.
Clearly, I mean, at some point, someone will change your nappy, you'll be fine. Toward 2000 was, and the Curiosity Show, which is a show here in Adelaide, and they were those two shows were basically the fundamental change in my life, the catalyst that made me start a life in design. I loved it, the technology, and then it went into Beyond 2000. And great shows where we celebrated cleverness as opposed to the mock life situational.
But wouldn't that make a cool show, Brandon? Like, imagine if you were to get like a Netflix series or something, and you could follow the people. I mean, there's been a couple of those series which have been absolutely wonderful, and they've shown, I think it was like the Nike shoes, and they go through that process. I can't remember what it's probably just called design. I can't remember. Imagine doing that.
Abstract,
Abstract, that was fantastic.
Amazing series,
Imagine doing that for the design awards. That would be cool. Like, here's the product, we follow it all the way through. Here's the trials and tribulations. Here it is, prototype 4's failing, and I can't get funding. Like, it'd make a cool TV show.
It would. We do have. We've partnered with the Australia by Design crew that have a show called Australia by Design Innovations on Channel 10. So that's been going for 4 years, believe it or not. And it, that features a selection of projects that come through the awards and puts them on mainstream TV. But I just think there's so much scope for more. There's reality TV bores me to death, and there's so much crap on TV at the moment. But we can actually start to harness some of these stories. For me, it's not just the end product; it's the story behind the design. I think that's just fascinating, and it's probably one of the reasons I
the journey
absolutely
augments the beauty.
Yeah, I love the awards because every year there's a whole new set of stories, a whole new set of people, and when you dig deeper and you go, they've gone through hell and high water to put this product on the market, and they've mortgaged their house, and they've struggled with this, and they struggled with manufacturers overseas, and I love that because it just shows that grit of what it takes to get a product to market. It's bloody difficult.
And not wrong.
Yeah.
I feel the disturbance in the force as a result of the comments. It's as though 2 lives have just been destroyed. And
how about you, Brandon? Do you ever get on the tools for fun? Do you ever design or DIY projects?
I absolutely do. I've got a little workshop downstairs, and that's my quiet place. Don't come in here. I'm just cutting wood and making stuff.
Yeah.
I think any designer, right, particularly industrial designers, that just love that. That's our way of relaxing. But yeah, no, ever since I was a young kid, as I said, on the farm, it's just being able to take things apart, and I try and actually teach my kids that as well. If it's broken, see if you can fix it. Go on.
How old are your kids?
So, 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old daughter.
Nice. So what are you making at the moment? What's the project at the moment?
Project at the moment is an outdoor screen that's hanging over our pool.
Nice. Love it.
That's meant to retract if the wind sort of gets up to a certain speed. So we've got a little windometer that triggers the whole thing, so it actually collapses. But it's a bit of prototyping at the moment.
That's absolutely fantastic. All right, we can't let you go without our one final question, which is, how do you define success?
Wow. How do I define success? I think it's being content with where you are in life, really. I think it's actually just being happy and content with who you are. I'll have to end with paraphrasing my dad yet again. He said the most successful people in the world are often the nicest, and I really have gone through life noticing that. You'll see that you meet some of the most incredibly successful people in the world, and they're actually, most of them, are actually nice, genuine people. So yeah.
Nice.
That's a beautiful way to end it, I reckon.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much for your time, Brandon.
Brandon, we love it. It's been great, wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My absolute honour. Love talking to you guys. Could easily have chewed up another hour of this evening, but no, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Very
Brandon.
good.
Take care. And to the listeners, I hope that you enjoyed that as much as we did. Thanks for listening to the show. And if you'd like to find out more about Chiron Audio or Devison Design and how we can create bespoke luxury environments and experiences in your life, you're more than welcome to book a call with one of our principals through our websites, chironaudio.com.au or devisondesign.com.au, or follow us on our socials.